Thank you. Thank you very much. First, it's great to be with you. I would like to also thank all the organizers for giving this opportunity to us and for this great event. I would like to share my screen. Is it visible now?
It is now, yes.
All right, thank you. Today we are going to be talking
Mehmet,
about...
maybe you could also put it in a larger screen. So here in the, yeah.
Is it now?
It's
Fit?
now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. The United Nations peacekeeping operations, we are going to be talking about. First, I would like to say that the top priority of the presentation is going to be, with one sentence, I'm going to describe this. I'm going to be giving some criteria, and I'm going to be putting them onto the cases that I'm going to be talking about, and I will be evaluating them in terms of success or failure. So how the presentation will take place. First, I'm going to be talking about the peacekeeping operations, the their horizon, and the way they also developed through the time and also the day back. And also after that, I'm going to be talking about the criterions. And after the criterions, we will be talking about the 4 cases, 2 of them, which is a total failure, and the 2 of them considered success. And right after that, I'm going to be also giving a table, which I've just assigned, going to be evaluating these cases, which I've just taken almost 12 or 11. Excuse me for that. And I'm going to be evaluating in terms of success or failure again. So the rise and the development of the peacekeeping in terms of theoretical background, I'm going to be the first one I would like to say. The United Nations peacekeeping operations has been clearly related to the role the United Nations as an organization has just identified itself as to the top task it's given to each other, which is to secure and settle the peace, and also, of course, to continuation of the peace in the international organization as an international relations, of course. So from this point of view, the first peacekeeping operations was to supervision as an observatory mission to do the Arab nations and the Israel conflict, which has just occurred after the World War II. And from that on, through the Cold War, it was kind of, I'm not going to get in a lot of details in there. So basically, it was just squeezed between 2 powers, the great powers, which has been still inactive. It was Soviet Union, which now is Russian Federation, and the United States of America. So it wasn't easy to launch an peacekeeping operations. They were very low, but after the Cold War ending, after the fall of the Soviet Union, these, of course, began to change, and a lot more peacekeeping operations were launched to take place. And the success and failure description also is a matter of fact, actually, should we be talking about. In what cases are we going to tell a success, or which cases we are going to say failure? Of course, it depends on the criteria that we have just should be talking, probably, of course, in many articles just we've seen. So talking about, for example, it is successful because of they have completed their duty in terms of protection of civilians, or they've just failed just because the elections hasn't taken place, for example. Can we just give an example? We'll be talking about them a lot, of course. And the third and last one for the theoretical background is going to be fundamental criteria for success and failure. We're going to be giving 11 of them. For example, impartiality, or the willingness and the approval of the sides and the warring parties will be a game changer in terms of success and failure in these conflict areas. So criteria with respect to success and failure. The first one I would like to give as an affinity, or we can also say a word is the neighborhood. This one I would like to say that is precisely has a connection with the ties between these troops and the military personnel having taxed or to be sent actually to be settled in these conflict zones. For example, we are talking about Sierra Leone. If there is a neighbor countries such as, for example, some troops from Nigeria or from Chad, will be definitely better than England or France, because of the neighborhood and affinity, so that this country wouldn't see them as a threat. But one little fact is quite important. These soldiers that should be from the neighbor is a good thing. It's one factor, but it shouldn't be the ones who these countries have some disputes. For example, in case of Liberia and the Sierra Leone. The second one, I'm not getting a lot of details about things, just basically because of the time and description that you just given us 15 minutes. Impartiality and the non-use of force is another criteria that I would just like to mention. It's impartiality in terms of these troops shouldn't be siding one or the other one. Their clear non-use of force is also related to this one. So the United Nations peacekeeping operations or these peacekeeping forces are sent to these conflict zones in order to give an end to conflict or to protect the civilians, basically. So when you're just siding on one side, where you're taking backing one side in terms of the other one against the other one, so that will just cause another conflict, and the United Nations peacekeeping operations impartiality will fail in that case, and they will be targeted just exactly the way it happened in Somalia, which we'll be talking about that in that case. The third one is cooperation of the outside actors. On this one, specifically, we are going to be talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo, or shortly in terms of DRC, which there was a government which has been supported by the United States of America, had been supported by the United States of America before the fall of the Soviet Union, because they wanted to their dominance in the region. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, they've just changed the direction to the Kabila government in order to democratize and just to make more the country a little bit more liberalize the situation in this country. But in that case, of course, Mobutu has changed its direction to the France, and the France and the United States are the two countries of the five permanent members of the United Nations, of course, which is quite important. So the Democratic Republic of Congo, in this case, we are going to be saying, of course, is still an ongoing peacekeeping operation. Still, there is a lot of questions to answer in terms of, and we will be saying that too. The security concerns of foreign parties is the next one. Is this one, when you're impartial, when you're objective in the mission, of course, you do not have the chance or position to give any concerns to foreign parties. In this case, these parties may show you sympathy, and they can act also in terms of, for the sake of, in terms of goodness, of course, for the sake of the process, especially in terms of peace. And the fifth one is the clear and implementable roadmap. Is one of the most, maybe even if it is not most, one of the most important one is, and in terms of mandate, it should be definitely strong mandate, which they clearly failed in 3 cases in terms of Rwanda and also especially also the Bosnia-Herzegovina and Somalia, which they clearly failed. These 3 are because they weren't mandated clearly. Their purposes and objectives of the mission weren't even clear. They were just sent there. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, weren't even a peace, actually, where there were a lot of threats, but there wasn't enough or clear objectives or the orders that should be taking place for these troops. The next one, the deployment of troops on time and in place, which in Rwanda case, again, is going to be failed. This is quite important, especially in terms, we are going to be talking about Macedonia, which has been done clearly, and because of that, it suits very well. Nothing have happened in the Macedonia in terms of loss of the lives or the civilian population atrocities or the ethnic cleansing just exactly have happened and occurred in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Rwanda, is precisely because the duty itself and the troops have been settled to the exact time it has been done. The competence of duty duration related to this one, again, is also important. For example, in the Liberia, the troops were withdrawn in 2016 after almost 10 to 15 years in there. They've done their job clearly. They've mobilized, demilitarized all of the parties, almost 15,000, just exactly also in the Mozambique. So this is also quite important in terms of success, sure. Domestic and the broad coordination in terms of the World Bank or the International Monetary Forum and the World Health Organization. These organizations are quite important in terms of broadband in the domestic, also the non-governmental organizations, and these humanitarian aid organizations also quite important in terms of, which in the Liberia case, which has been quite important in terms of assessing for the assessment of success. And the ownership, especially in terms of the warring parties. This one is quite related to the security concern of the warring parties, but in the case they don't have a security concern of the warring, these parties should, of course, they own, in terms of ownership, they show quite indications to also own these peacekeeping operations. They assist them, they give them, they open them chances, they militarize, especially for handing guns down, is a very important factor and criteria that we'll be talking about for that. The protection of civilians is R2P, which also will be shared responsibility to protect the 2005, which has been clearly failed for 3 cases we'll be talking. willingness and the sincerity is also correlated with the ownership and the security concerns of the warring parties is quite important. By the time you are impartial, by the time you are objective, you do not take any side for you watch on another one. In that case, the willingness and the sincerity of the warring parties can be demonstrated in terms of the success and the failure. So cases with respect to success and failure, Macedonia, Mozambique can be clearly and completely actually can be described as a successful. But Somalia, Rwanda, and also the Bosnia and Herzegovina, I would like to say for the fifth one will be definitely and unquestionably a disastrous results and the consequences in terms of civilian casualties and also the peacekeeping operations for these peacekeeping operations in the places for the United Nations as an organization, and a clear failure responsible to protect for the Security Council and the P5 members. So this table, I would like to also show you that we've got 11 these criteria on the top, and on the left side, we've got these cases that I would like to mention just about 5 minutes here. So the DRC, in terms of affinity, willingness, and sincerity, and in person and so from, there are not a lot of things that you should be mentioned, but cooperation of outside actors is clearly failed, as we have exactly said. The support by the United States of America to the Mobutu government when they have a kind of confrontation with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and by the fall of the Soviet Union, that changed their direction and right exactly into the Kabila, which just turned the situation for the France, who has also loved to have that Germany, which is struggling right now in the Africa North as well. So these criteria clearly failed. The security concerns of foreign parties, which connected to cooperation of outside access, also as a result of that, of course, in 2012, the Kabila has been killed, has been murdered, and because of that, still there is an active and ongoing civil war in there. There are still questions and also wars in there, which also the peacekeeping operations have still settled in there. And the clear and implemented roadmap was also a question. The deployment of troops and time and new place was also exactly. But we are talking about the competence of duty duration. It's almost 20 or 25 years that the United Nations peacekeepers are there, but still not a question, even though they have been there for more than 20 years. Domestic and broad coordination, again, it's failed because of this situation with toggle between France and the United States. And ownership, again, because of their security concern. They've just did exactly done the way I've done, talking about warring parties, of course. South Sudan, willingness failed, impartial and non-use of force, and no need and affinity to anything to assess. Cooperation of outsiders were settled up. The security concerns of foreign parties, not to mention, clear and implemented roadmap was quite clear in terms of protection. Civilians was very nice. The deployment of the troops in time and the place was again clearly done by the United Nations. The companies of duty, again, domestic and broad coordination, again, and ownership, again, was in terms of success criteria were nice. North Macedonia, all of them were set well, exactly, with the UNPRODEP and UNPROFOR, United Nations Protection Force and United Preventive Force. They've done their job clearly, and they've really impeded and blocked that in many cases will be probably just like Bosnia and Herzegovina what have happened, but just clearly prevented that one by doing the things that we've just mentioned. Liberia, again, was exactly the same, just domestic brand coordination and ownership was a little bit fed because of the government lackness in terms of the willingness. We're talking about Darfur, again, just in terms of implementable roadmap failed, but in terms of protecting civilians especially, and most importantly, were definitely nice. And we're talking about Mozambique and Sierra Leone, just one or two criteria, such as this for Sierra Leone affinity, except that one was clearly successful. But we are talking about Rwanda, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Somalia. I would like to assess these three clearly fail, and as an debacle for the United Nations as an organization, and a clear failed attentiveness for example, the Security Council, especially the responsibility to protect. Of course, when these three things occur, the responsibility to protect doctrine was not in place, because this is being signed and also has been shown, demonstrated after these things. But I would like to give my presentation. I would like to give an end to my presentation with this thing. The two events have been declared and acknowledged as the genocide, civil genocide, civilian protection loss, was the Rwanda and the Bosnia and Herzegovina after the World War. The only two events the United Nations has acknowledged as precisely, I'm trying to choose the political term correctly, is precisely and predominantly, of course, the genocide And these things, when were taking place, the United Nations peacekeeping operations were exactly there. So these are actually shows us clearly that they failed to protect the civilians, which two of them were clearly acknowledged also by the United Nations as a clear and unquestionable genocide. Thank you very much. I think it's 10 seconds to go for 15. I hope I've just done well. Thank you very much for listening, for your participation.